The structure of this workshop is going to be very similar to the pacing guide workshop. So I will go through some of the ideas and tips that I have for you, and then all the materials that you need are along the side here, and you can stay as long as you want. You can take it back to your classroom or work on it, whatever you would like to do. And these are just ideas, okay? So I heard you sharing some tips before we started. That's awesome. Some of the best ideas come from people who have implemented this. So just take it all with a grain of salt. So today we're going to be talking about small groups in the classroom, and we're going to primarily be focusing on reading, although you could apply this to the math workshop. Reading workshops seem to have a lot more resources and organizational materials available for them. So one of the first things you need to do if you're going to set up a small group is get organized with your visuals for a small group. So I have some different supplies over here that I'll be passing out to you guys. I have a stack of binders available. They're not the prettiest. They're from the Lost Binder Closet. If you have better binders, you're welcome to, but they're free. So I do have binders here, and I have a binder for all my small groups. I kept all mine in one binder. You can have one for a group, but you don't need a ton of stuff for your group. I also have, I copied them on cardstock. They're tabs here if you want to make your own tabs. And then just little dividers for sections that you might want. So notes, data, your groups, etc. So you're welcome to take this and use it or not if you don't want to. I do have a giant stack of tabs over here. Again, it's like the stack of miscellaneous tabs. So you're welcome to go through here and grab whatever you would like to make your binder. So, when you're setting up your binder, one of my favorite ways to organize my students, because I'm such a visual person, is by using baseball card holders. So I would have, and I have plenty of these here for you, so you are welcome to take them for your binders, but I would take pictures of all of my students, and I had first day pictures anyways for them. You're probably going to want to have them pull their mask down so you can see their face. And then I would print them out the size of a baseball card. And I would sort the students into their groups visually. And then I would put a little round sticker in the bottom of their picture with their level written on it. So when I looked at my group, I'm not going to have all the same level in a group. We can't do that. But I could get a general feel for what the levels in that group were. And then when they moved up, when I got new data, I just put a new sticker over the old one. And so, you know, and sometimes I would peel the stickers off if I needed to quickly see like what their growth was. But it's just a really easy way to sort your groups. I also have index cards over there. So you could just write the name of your students and any notes or levels on there and then sort index cards in here. But I find physically sorting students into groups, and then when you're pulling your groups up, it's also a great way to take attendance, or if there's a sub there, they can quickly see who is supposed to be in that group. So, my first piece of advice is to take pictures of your students or write names on index cards and then make notes of the scores and levels on those cards. From there, you can sort your students into groups. And groups can be created in a multitude of ways. We have a lot of data. My goal was to have your BPST data, your Fluency data, your STAR data. We're still trying to work that out, but you have your STAR data at least. And you could clump students on fictional, you could clump students on informational. That's very different. Students can perform very differently, but depending on what your focus is for your whole group, you might be switching students around. You could focus students on fluency. So there's a variety of ways that you can group students in your groups. Then create tabs for each group. So you have your pictures, if that's what you choose to do. You could put a printout behind the tab. I recommend 5 to 6 students max in a small group. Any more than that, and you're going to have trouble like really getting to all the students during the group time. Once you have grouped your students behind the tab, it's time to start thinking about what are you going to do with those students when they come to you in your groups. And there are a lot of different graphic organizers online that you can use to create lessons for your small group. So this one is quite detailed. It has like the lesson number, if you're doing a benchmark lesson, the genre, the skill, and then before reading, during reading, after reading, so if you're reading with students. This one has sort of a quick at a glance for all 5 groups. And then if you want different notes per student, you could include those. And then there's one more here that has it day 1, day 2, day 3. So if you're doing like a 5-day grouping of lessons for your students. So you're each going to get a set of these, and you can decide what's your style with writing your lessons down for your groups. How do you want that to look when you write them down? Another graphic organizer that you can use, and this comes from a book that was kind of my Bible when I did small groups. I have my stickies all over it here, but it's Jan Richardson. If any of you have ever heard of her, guided reading, you are welcome to borrow this book. I've already got it all tabbed and everything. But she has created these awesome graphic organizers for all different levels. So your pre-level, those are like your non-readers, and your emergent, your early guided reading plan, all the way up to your fluent. And it really breaks it down for you, like what new book are you introducing, or what new article? What new vocabulary do you want to go over with your students? What strategy are you going to be modeling for them during that? So this is what I used with my small group because it was a no-brainer. I just went through, I just jotted notes of each of those, and then when my students came up to me, we had the vocabulary ready to review. I knew exactly what strategy I was talking about with them, and I would just paperclip the readings to this. So these are a little bit more general if you sort of have your own program that you're using. These are a little bit more detailed. Yeah?
What's the author of that book?
Jan Richardson. And if we're interested, I wonder if we could even get a book study going here, if Mr. Marquez would purchase these for us. Because Monterey invested, this was like our huge study the year before quarantine, we all got them. But it has lessons and it walks you through like each student, but it's way more than what we would have time for in the workshop, so we have to do it separate. But I'll serve, when I send my survey out afterwards, I'll see if you guys are interested in a book study for that. So you're going to get these lesson plans, and I suggest keeping this as your master and just photocopying these if you want them for students. And to be honest, one of these lessons would take me about 3 group times, 3 to 4 group times. You're not going to use one every single time you meet with your students. You just can't get through it all. And so that's something we're going to talk about in a minute, is like, how long do your groups last? So I will pass out templates for you to kind of outline your group lessons. Another thing that I have from you that comes from that Jan Richardson book are little cards that you can cut out, and I have book rings if you want to put them on a book ring. I can also make more color copies for you. I used to have one set for each student so that they could have like the card in front of them, but you could just have one set for your guided reading group. And it has different strategies that you can use with reading. So you could simply pull a paragraph out of your benchmark book and say, we're going to use the 5-finger retell strategy today on this paragraph from benchmark. It doesn't even need to be complicated when you pull the students to you. But these are excellent if you are just getting your feet wet, you don't want to plan a whole lesson, but you just want to start pulling students to you to work on strategies. And there's quite a few. That's a stapled packet, so you can cut them out. And then these are shared retelling cards. So if you want students to practice summarizing or retelling the story with your small group, you could just pass out the cards and then they can each use their cards. So just some resources to use in your small groups. So you've created your binder, you've created your groups, you've reflected on the data that you have, and you've thought, well, what do I want this small group to work on? You have, if you came to, did you all come to the vertical alignment standards? I know you didn't, Daniel, but we can get you that stuff. You have your vertical alignment of standards. So if you're looking at a group in your sheets, it's working at a 2nd grade level, you teach 4th grade. boom, look at your vertical alignment of standards, see what standards that second grade group is working at, start pulling in resources for that standard, and then the next standard when they're ready for it until you can get them up to that fourth grade standard. That's another good way to do it. The groups are flexible. Students do not stay in the same group all year. I hope they don't, unless the entire group is moving up at the same time. That would be very exciting. But chances are, some of these students just need a little bit of confidence, a little bit of love, and that one-on-one time, even though it's a small group. You're gonna have kids that are ready to go up to that next group. Don't be afraid to move them. So when you make the groups, I always did it with the philosophy of, this is your family for now, this is a flexible group, and it's really great if you don't name them like high, medium, low names. You know, if you use animal names or things like that, then they don't know that they're moving to a higher grade. You know, create the culture of these groups are flexible. Check your data and your rubrics often, but you can also use anecdotal data. I mean, you are in charge here. So, some logistics. How long should you have a small group with you for? That is up to you. I used to keep my small groups for about 10 minutes because after 10 minutes, I was ready to move on. Like I was getting a little antsy. However, you have to think logistics and what your other students are working on and how long do they need for those activities. So we're going to talk about like what is the rest of the class doing while you're working with your small groups in a minute. And if you're switching every 10 minutes, I guarantee the kids that are working on a worksheet are probably going to feel panicky because they're not getting that worksheet done. So then you have to say, are we going to be doing the same centers for 2 or 3 days so they could come back to that worksheet tomorrow and work on it? That's a thought too. I have an outline over here that I'll give to you. And it walks through what a 30-minute small group would look like if you broke it down. I think that's a little long. But maybe you want a 30-minute work. I mean, obviously this person did, so, you know, you could do that. But it's also a good idea just to see, like, if you wanted a shorter one. Yeah.
So, I mean, I could see the 30-minute if I only had, let's say, 5 or 6 kids that are behind. And I'm trying to only catch those folks up and everybody else is right along.
Yeah.
But if you have the flipped classroom, where we have maybe 5 or 6 that are capable of doing the work.
Right.
And the whole rest of the class is not.
Right.
So what do? Do you do 10 minutes and you just split the whole bunch that can't do it up in 4 different groups or so? And then whoever isn't with you is working on something else?
Yeah, that's a great question.
They are not really capable of working anything but maybe Lexia by themselves, which adapts to them.
That is a really good question. So after you've established your time length, you create your daily schedule for groups. I would work with my lowest students every single day. That was a non-negotiable. They needed to be one-on-one, and when I say one-on-one, I mean small group. They needed to be small group with a teacher, not just a push-in parapro. We know research tells us your lowest group should be working with your highest skilled teachers in the classroom, and it's very tempting to say, oh, my parapros are working with these students, that's enough. But it's not the same as the small groups with you. Let's say you have an hour for your ELA time. I'm not familiar with the schedules that you submitted, but I think you have an ELA block. You have to decide, are you going to do a whole group lesson for any of that? For me, I usually did a mentor text lesson. I wasn't a huge fan of benchmark. And so I would take the skill or standard that the benchmark lesson touched on, and then I would pull in my own mentor text or lesson to match up with that. And then I would do whole group for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. That way my kids knew the strategy we were working on in small groups for the week. Then my kids would go off into small groups, and I projected the schedule on the board so they could see exactly at what time they were at what centers. I got frames from the Dollar Tree, and I put them on each of my tables. So those were like the names of the centers, Center 1, Center 2, and that correlated with the schedule that I had on the board, so they could easily see what table they needed to move to. The activities that I had at the other tables, and I have a list of suggestions for you here, were scaled to the level of my students. So if I have a very advanced group, they're not going to be doing the same center activity as my lowest group because, Ms. Perez, you're right. They can't access the same text or the same activities. That's where the differentiation comes in. So, Epic. I might assign a book on Epic, but it's a different book depending on which group you're in. And I know on Epic you can create books and assign, or create groups and assign books to them. They might be working on a novel study. And before we started, I heard Ms. Kemper saying, you train. Like the first 2 weeks, you're not even meeting with small groups. You are teaching them how to run centers by themselves. So if you are big into novel studies, you might be teaching them the different rules or what's expected if they're meeting with their novel study group. One center could be vocabulary or word work group that directly relates to the activity they're going to be doing with you in small group. One year for Halloween, I had an article on zombies, and it was a very high interest article at the small group, but there were some words in there that were challenging. So the center immediately before mine was a video of me doing a slideshow with the vocabulary they were going to be reading in the small group with me. So it was getting them really excited about the article because they were getting a taste of the words. And then when they got to me, they knew what those words were, they could pronounce them, and we could jump right into the reading. So that's an idea. Games are always hits. There's a lot of free games on Teacher Pay Teacher, and I've shared my teacher resource folder with you. So many games. Task cards can be put at a center. I'm always trying to find fun containers to put the task cards in so they can reach in and pull the task card out. It makes it a little fun. Holiday activities. This is a perfect time if you have, Christmas worksheets that you love doing with them, but you can't justify, a 20-minute block in your classroom. Make it a center. It's kind of fun. They could be working on a writing piece. For speaking and listening, you can bring in your ELL strategies, but I used to record myself reading articles, and then I'd have a Google form that they had to answer questions, so they were listening to the audio and answering. That's LPAC right there. So that's a very easy center for them that's hitting an LPAC strategy. Flipped lessons. You can videotape yourself like I did with the slideshow. We all know how to use Zoom now, so just open up your own Zoom meeting with yourself, share your screen, do a quick lesson, and they can engage with that while you're with your centers. And then lastly, for the older kids, CNN 10, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it is free every single day. It's a 10-minute news show that's appropriate for kids. It's made for kids, and it summarizes current events. And so I would have a note catcher. They would take notes while they watch it, and then they would do a flip grid pretending to be the news announcer, summarizing the news back to me. Yeah, and if you want to get more advanced, they would have a rubric of what I expected, and I can share all of the stuff with you. And then they graded each other's flip grids with the rubric in the videos. They would do a video response. I loved how you spoke clearly and loudly, but I feel like you missed the main idea in this. So they're interacting, and so that's an idea. So you can see there are so many ideas for what your students can be doing while you are meeting with your small groups that are highly engaging, that are hitting the standards, and they aren't, we love Lexia, we love Dreambox, but putting your kids on Lexia or Dreambox during a center, I feel is wasting an opportunity to use that time to target a standard. So you could probably brainstorm even more ideas than this that are just super creative and standards-based. You could even do a craftivity during this time, or I want to do a workshop coming up on AVID strategies, and a one-pager is a really great strategy. I just feel like, Nicole, you and I are we probably went to all the same conferences. They read a piece, usually an article, and then they do an art piece on a sheet of paper with the notes about what they've read, and they incorporate art in it, and they're gorgeous. They're really nice. So that is what other students can do while you're meeting with centers. Does that kind of answer your question, Ms. Perez? We're here for you. We're going to keep brainstorming with you. So then what are you doing where are you getting the resources for your small group, right? Benchmark does not tell you this is what you should be doing with your small group this week. It's just a lesson. So there's a lot of different places you can get ideas for your small groups. I love News ELA. And then there's, what's the other one that has the articles? ReadWorks, okay, yes. And News LA, you can get the same article leveled. So your kids don't know that they're not reading at the same level as the other students. So that's a really good one. And it comes with questions. So there's already built-in questions that you can ask them. Benchmark books. We have the leveled readers in our classroom, but if your students are not reading at your grade level, we have tons of...
Blake, please report to the front office. You're going home. Blake Anderson, please report to the front office.
We have tons of generous teachers that will most likely let you come in and, search through their benchmark books to grab a lower level. Eventually, I would like to have a leveled book room in the school where you can go get books at every level for benchmark, but for now we're just gonna have to borrow from each other. But if you can grab a set of books at the lower level, that could probably take you through 2 weeks of small groups, one of those. A lower grade lesson. So on benchmark, I believe do you have the ability to toggle? Mm-hmm. So you can go down a grade level and just see like what the standards are that grade level or what lesson would match your standards. Or a reinforcement activity. So again, there are so many creative ideas online. Just take a look at the standard. I just keep going back to the standards because that's a unifying conditioner through all of this. Find the standard and find a great activity and just engage those students. Have them talking, have them interacting with you, and listen to what they're saying so you can correct on the spot when they're getting it wrong. So a room that's like perfect with small groups could look a million different ways. There is no one way to walk into a room and say, this is the picture of what small groups could look like. It could be you working with a small group at your kidney table or whatever your table is, and numbered groups around the classroom. That is what my small groups look like. And then when we hit the timer, we switched and all the kids switched. Your small groups could look like, all the centers are working differently and you're rotating among the centers and checking in with the students, different ways, however you want to physically set it up. So that is pretty much the intro to small groups. You could do a year-long study on how to run small groups, but for now, we're just dipping our toes in. And maybe dipping your toes in is, just doing like pull out vocab with your kids or something like that. So whatever you would like. Are there any questions that you guys have? Okay, so we have all the resources over here that you could possibly need to set up your small group binders. We have your binders, we have tabs if you would like to set the groups up. And I will start passing these out. So this is a possible schedule. Again, 30 minutes seems a little long, but you can modify it. I'm always finding things that I think I could use this or that from it, but I'm not going to use everything here. There you go. And this, I thought could be helpful in the front of your binder. It is a list of strategies and skills by level. So you can see it's sort of like the vertical alignment with standards, but skills for reading. And then the second one is word lists that students should know by level. I never really used the word list because other than having students just read words to me, I didn't really know how to use it, but maybe you can find a creative way to incorporate that. That could even be a center. They have to do a flip grid where they're reading you words, or use your Parapro for that. Okay, and then, let's see. We'll do the general templates next. So these are very basic, open-ended templates that I've got so many paper clips. I was in the kindergarten room and they spoke in Spanish, so I wasn't quite sure what they were saying, but I got the gist of why do you have so many paper clips? Okay, and then these are the more detailed lesson plans. I'm going to call them like lesson plans for dummies, because this is what I use where you can just jot your notes down. For the group. And if you want any of this stuff printed in color for you, like I just feel color makes everything happier, just shoot me an email or cut a post-it and stick it in my mailbox and I'll have it to you by the end of the day, like with as many copies as you want. Because personally, if I'm looking at something every day, color makes me a little happier.
That things would be good to take into an SST and
Yes. Data.
What do you do if you have a student that is a complete outlier?
Yeah.
I have one student that reads at a 1.2 level, and basically can only read certain sight words when I did the fluency. Eight words a minute, just sight words, basically, like the A. And then the rest are at a fluency of maybe 44 in the 40, 50s.
Right.
Plus better ones, of course. So that student doesn't fit in any group whatsoever.
So at that point, I would chat with your team and see if anyone else on your team has a couple of students that low and because I think you guys are all doing ELA approximately at the same time, that's the benefit. Maybe you could create a team of students that are very low and one teacher can incorporate that into their classroom.
Yes.
Or you could just work one-on-one with her and she could be her own center and it feels like that would be isolating for her, but again, you can create the culture of, you know, we're trying to fill that gap here. But you can't ignore her and putting her in with higher students.
Makes no sense either,
Yeah, it depends how much higher those other students are.
But as I said, the others read at 44 words a minute and can actually read a text. It's just slow, and she really can't.
So at that point, I would get with the rest of your team and just see if you
You
can.
could do one, like you said, your group is one-on-one.
Yeah.
The group doesn't have to be 5 or 6.
Right, but
It
if
can
I
be
want to
one.
get through 30,
You're not gonna
then
But
I can't
you
take,
gotta-
half an hour on one student.
I have one student that fits into that's an outlier in my class, and he sees me for 10 minutes a day.
Same.
We get through something
Some
very
students you
short
might
and
not
quick,
see.
10 minutes a
Some
day.
students, you might see them once a week, twice a week.
Yeah.
It all depends.
Yeah, you might see them once a week for
You're-
10 minutes and say, oh, yeah, goodbye.
Yeah,
They don't need you.
the highest students or from your class, I won't say like the highest in terms of like their reading kiddo, but your highest, you might see them twice a week.
Yeah, you don't have
Or
to
you
see
don't have to see
every
them every
kid
single
every day.
day.
You don't have to see
No.
every kid every day, and you don't have to see, some kids don't need to do it, like, you can just go kind of checking with them, they will be fine
Right.
with full instruction. They don't need that intervention piece.
Yes, that is.
So that's why I'm saying, like, my low students, non-negotiable every single day.
Yeah.
But you also want to be careful that your high students aren't an afterthought.
Yeah, absolutely,
Because
that's not really
Yeah.
anything like.
No, I know what you're saying, absolutely. But it became something with me. Like if I had to do triage, my lower students got my time, but you know.
Because the cow was very
Are they gonna figure out like, how does my lesson, you know what I mean, it's a good temperature gauge for me.
What is this?
And then, it's all about community.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, your honey's okay? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm gonna start
And I didn't even tell him anything from yesterday.
So it just
So this
passed
is
out, this is also very interesting. It's a rubric of where your students are going in each of these groups. So I was thinking, if you wanted to print out one for each student and check off the skills on here, and then like if they've mastered all the skills, they're kind of ready to move on to the next group. There's a lot of ways you could use it, but it caught my eye. I've actually never used this before, but it was in the folder and I thought, oh, I'm gonna print it out. That's kind of cool. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you these retelling cards. And again, if you want more sets, just let me know. I have book rings over here. But I also know that you are all very busy, so if you want them cut out and assembled on book rings, I can do that and put them in your mailbox, okay? Just tell me how many sets you would like, because it took me like 2 months when I got that book to get these copied and cut out and put on book rings, because we're busy. That's not, so I always thought it'd be nice if somebody just did that for us, but I would need to know how many sets you would want, so.
Are these available like electronically in a
Yeah.
PDF or something? I mean,
Absolutely. I will email you my folder. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
sorry.
that's what they're.
I have all of the stuff digital, so I'll email you the folder that it's in. Oops. Okay, I think that's all the sheets that I have to pass out to you. If you are working on small groups and you think, if only I had this one thing for small groups, or it would be really, or this is a problem I'm having with small groups, shoot me an email. I will hunt down the form. I will figure out a solution. We can crowdsource and figure it out for you. So I'm really loving our workshops and coming together and getting these ideas. And even if you don't use 90% of the things you get, but you use 10%, you know, it's something. 10% better is amazing. So, any questions? Any comments? Anything? Okay. Yeah.
I think that it doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning.
Yes.
I think that you can start small.
Yes.
You know, so if you just start with the easy things they do, even if you just start with they do simple color sheets like full groups, make it easy. So and then you can ramp up the academic
Yes.
centers. Start you can give yourself some breaks. It's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to all be beginner, and it doesn't have to be this super elaborate thing to begin with.
Yes.
So you're training the kids. You're training the kids and yourself, and so you can kind of layer stuff on. You don't have to like take it all on and be complicated all at once.
Amazing. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I used to put so much pressure on myself that my centers needed to be these great, exciting centers, laminated in color, and my center groups needed to be whole, complete lessons. And eventually you would like your centers to be engaging and your lessons to be complete, but exactly as Ms. Kemper said, starting is better than nothing, you know, so start small. I also remembered one other organizer, I guess I didn't copy. It's a Post-it note holder for each group. So I use Post-its for everything. And then I transfer them into like spreadsheets. But if you just want to write a Post-it, I'll go run some copies of those. You just stick your Post-it on this organizer and stick it in your group. And then when you open your tab, you can see all your notes. Sometimes I even had one Post-it per child, and I would just write down, you know, having trouble with multisyllabic words or whatever, and then the next day I could check off like, oh, we solved that problem. Wouldn't it be nice to solve that problem in one day? Awesome. Okay guys, well, thanks so much for coming, and